much for joining me on Being Indispensable. My name's Liz Van Vliet. We're all dispensable. I know that better than anyone. I'm a breast cancer survivor. But that doesn't mean that we can't invest in ourselves to improve the skills and capabilities that are going to help us stand out and be perceived as indispensable. Being indispensable is also about the being side of the equation. Because if we're not looking after ourselves and our own well-being, then we have no hope of showing up as indispensable in the workplace.
Hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to episode 75. Today, it's a being episode. And I want to share with you something that happened to me last week. I was down in Melbourne presenting. I did a keynote presentation and a workshop for an internal office professionals conference for a company. And it was a fantastic experience. Shout out to all the office professionals I met last week. But an interesting thing happened on the second day in the workshop that I presented. I was presenting on the topic of owning your brand as an executive assistant, or in this case, as an office professional. And what I was doing was taking the audience through it was a workshop. And the idea was that we were going to come out at the end of it with a way of articulating the brand value that you as an individual bring to the table as an office professional or executive assistant. And during the session, as I was explaining what it was all about, I got an interesting comment from the audience that really did stop me in my tracks. I had gone through all of the part of my presentation where I outlined why executive assistants and office professionals, in fact, any professional, needs to think of themselves as a brand. That in the same way as, a can of Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola, the company, has brand attributes, well, so too do you as an executive assistant or office professional, whatever the case may be. And what I was going to do was I had given an introduction. I talked about, why it's important. And I had outlined a couple of brand statements that we were going to work on. And then this comment came from somebody in the audience, and she asked the question, or I think I asked the audience who was feeling comfortable or who was feeling uncomfortable about this concept of articulating your value. And this lady put up her hand, and I asked her if she could tell me why she was feeling uncomfortable. And her comment was, because it feels like self-promotion. And it literally stopped me in my tracks. It was such an interesting thing to say. And on so many levels, I should not have been surprised that this was the response of somebody in the audience. And in actual fact, when we actually explored it as a group, she was certainly not alone. But what I had not realised was how much this whole concept of self-promotion as a bad thing, how much of an issue it is for executive assistants and office professionals. So, the premise of my presentation was that when you introduce yourself or when somebody asks you what you do, most people will just say the classic, I'm just an office professional or I'm just an executive assistant. And they'll stop there. And the person that you're speaking to may or may not ask you some, probing questions about, well, what does that actually mean? And tell me more about yourself. More than likely, they won't. So my premise and my position is that rather than waiting to be invited to talk about the value that you bring to the table, I want you to be able to have the skills and the words to be able to give your elevator pitch. And the way I had, previously done this was that I have these couple of statements that I work with people to customize for their own purposes that encapsulate the who, the what, and the how that they actually, in terms of how they show up as an executive assistant. And this lady's feedback that she found that the barrier for her was that this felt like self-promotion, and she did not feel that that was something that she was A, comfortable with, and B, that she didn't have the permission to do that for herself. And I found that so interesting. And to be quite honest, I find it really sad that somebody should feel that way. And in hindsight and on reflection, one of the questions I should have asked her was whether or not this was coming from a position of, well, I don't have permission to talk about myself in these terms, in terms of my value. I only have permission to describe the job title that I do. Or if there was actually something from a religious standpoint that was behind this, because on reflection, I'm wondering if there's maybe something, if there was a religious aspect to it. If you are somebody that prescribes to a religion that, humility and modesty, for example, are important aspects of that religion as a woman, and there are, of course, religions like that, then this whole concept of talking about your value would smack of self-promotion, and it wouldn't be something that you'd be comfortable with. So there is that aspect to it. And I want to acknowledge that I didn't ask her that question. I wish I had. But in terms of self-promotion getting in the way of you being able to answer the question, what do you do? With a response that is more than I'm just an executive assistant or I'm just an office professional, then I want you to challenge that. And my wish for you is that rather than seeing it as self-promotion, and that speaks to me of feelings of unworthiness and feeling that, well, I'm nothing special. You are special. Every day you are helping somebody survive or thrive as an executive assistant, as an office professional. Every day you are showing up and you are doing one of those, and sometimes both of those things. And I meet executive assistants and office professionals that are doing that. And if there's one thing that I want to feel that I'm doing, it is helping you find your voice. Self-promotion is not a dirty word. In fact, it's not two dirty words. So if we take out the religious component, that your religion may not permit you, or it may be going, it may contravene your beliefs, your religious beliefs, to articulate your value and, speak about the value that you bring through your role, then what else is it that's getting in the way of you doing that? And why is it a bad thing? And if it makes you feel better to combine this statement, I am an executive assistant, and then follow it with the value statement, then maybe that's the tweak that you need to make. But what I do want you to do is take that just out. I don't want you to say, I'm just an ... because that is not something that validates you as an individual. It's certainly not something that validates and affirms you as an office professional. And I want you to not do it. I want you to try to notice if that's the language that you're using. And I want you to notice if that's the language that people around you use when they're describing you. As I often say when I'm presenting on this topic, if you were to be a fly on the wall and hear somebody ask your boss, who was that, if they didn't know you, what is it that they say? Think about that. Because if you don't know, it's something that would be good to have a conversation with them out of curiosity and ask them, how do you describe me? What are the words that you use? I'm really curious. Because as you know, curiosity is a great starting point for a conversation. So that is my episode for this week. Self-promotion is not a dirty word, is not two dirty words. And unless you have some sort of religious, belief that prevents you from giving somebody your little elevator pitch, then it's something that I'd like you to think about. And at the very least, I want you to lose the just, because you're anything but just an office professional, and you're anything but just an executive assistant. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.